We are truly living in interesting times when we can do a comparison video between a Ford and a McLaren. So what could a car from a pickup truck manufacturer possibly have in common with the latest Halo car from a company like McLaren, known for their race cars and the record-breaking F1? Probably a lot more than you think, so keep watching to find out, and be sure to crush those like and subscribe buttons. So before we go through all the stats and differences between these two mean track machines, let's go through the many things that they have in common first. Let's start with the easy stuff. These are both carbon chassis, which McLaren invented, by the way, mid-engine, sub 4.0 liter, twin-turbo, rear-wheel drive factory track cars, occupying that nether region between performance car and real race car. Both of these cars invoke racing legends. The McLaren with Ayrton Senna, one of the greatest F1 drivers ever.
Forever, 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 ever, forever, ever.
While the Ford GT calls back to, well, the Ford GT, but not the last generation, which was good in its own right, but the multiple Le Mans champion from the 60s. Now on to price and availability. The new Ford GTs went for between $400,000 and $450,000, which seemed like a lot to some people, as the last generation Ford GTs that came out about a decade ago went for around $120,000. But this new Ford GT is a completely different car. The new McLaren Senna was sold for £500,000, or about $670,000. Initially, both the Ford GT and the McLaren Senna were going to have production runs of 500, but Ford decided to up their run to 1,000 after sharp consumer interest. Both cars were sold out before their production run, and in fact, every single one of the McLaren Sennas were sold even before the car's unveiling. The cars presumably went to people who have either bought a P1 or a 720S. So basically, you either have one of these cars on order, or you can't get one. Ford decided to sell its GTs to Instagram celebrities and the like. You even had to make an audition video and send it to Ford, showing that you were worthy of them even selling you a GT. So both of these cars are crazy exclusive and are in the same ballpark as far as price goes. So what else do these cars have in common? Both the McLaren Senna and the Ford GT employ trick active suspensions. The Ford GT uses a double wishbone setup with a torsion spring, aka a bar that twists, and a regular spring used in series setup when the car is in non-track mode. When the car lowers to track mode, the regular spring is removed from the equation and only the torsion bar is left. This gives the Ford GT two different spring rates at its normal ride modes, softer when high up and stiffer when it's slammed in track mode. The Ford GT suspension also employs adjustable magnetic dampers. Remember when having those was a big deal? Anyways, the McLaren Senna will likely use some version of their awesome hydraulic suspensions that's found in cars like the P1 and 720S. This system works by, I actually don't completely understand how this system works, but everyone says it's very, very good and means the Senna can get away without a sway bar without affecting body roll. Both the McLaren Senna and the Ford GT will also utilize large amounts of that track speed cheat code, Aerodynamic Downforce. These cars don't just have a bunch of aero, they have a bunch of adjustable aero, which means that you can have maximum downforce during cornering and braking and minimum drag when going for top speed, the proverbial having of the cake whilst eating it. And we are not just talking about movable rear wings either, which both of these cars have, but movable bits in the front of the car and elsewhere to help with the aerodynamic balance and drag. So both of these are mid-engine, expensive, exclusive factory track cars with active aero and active suspension based on racing legends. But do they have anything else in common? Let's look at the drivetrains. The Ford GT uses a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6, which shares 90% of its parts with Ford's supernormal Ford Raptor, while the Senna utilizes a 3.8-liter twin-turbo V8 sourced out of McLaren's regular road car, the 720S. Both of these cars use a dual-clutch transmission and only spin the back wheels. No all-wheel drive easy button going on here. While we're still talking about drivetrains, we can start talking about the differences between these two apex predators, the engine output. The 3.5-liter V6, mostly from a pickup truck, makes an impressive 647 horsepower and 550 foot-pounds of torque, which would usually be good enough, except for this time it's competing with a 3.8-liter from a formula car manufacturer that makes an astounding 789 horsepower and 590 foot-pounds of torque. Sometimes you can make up for deficiency in power by having a lighter car, but unfortunately for the Ford, like many Americans, loses in this category, weighing in at 3,074 pounds, a debilitating 433 pounds heavier than the McLaren Senna's 2,641. So that makes the horsepower per ton rating of these two cars 597 for the Senna and 424 for the Ford. The power to weight ratio is not where the problems for the Ford ends. While both of these beasts have a bunch of active aerodynamic bits and suspension tricks, the Senna is just going to make more downforce. Just look at that crazy swan neck rear wing and race car diffuser. Not to mention all the openness in the front of the car, only surpassed by the Aston Martin Valkyrie. These aerodynamic factors, combined with the power-to-weight deficiency, will ensure that the Ford GT is not going to be faster around most racetracks that are not named Le Mans, which the Ford GT was specifically designed for. The one performance stat that the Ford GT might actually win is top speed. The Ford GT has a rated top speed of 216 miles per hour, which may not sound like much, but when you consider the reported top speed of the 2,200-pound, 1,100 horsepower Aston Martin Valkyrie is going to be 217 miles per hour, you can start to realize the downside of high downforce aerodynamics, pardon the pun, is a drag. So no matter how adjustable your aerodynamics are, there is always going to be a downside. And I don't see any angle that wing on the Senna can get to that will get it to the low drag properties of the Ford GT in VMAX setting. Air is heavy at 200 miles per hour. Just ask any survivors of a Cat 5 hurricane.
Oh, don't worry. I've been in some nasty storms. Oh my God!
That you can find alive. So the top speeds of these two cars may be closer than you think just looking at the horsepower numbers, but the Senna is going to be faster in just about every other way. But this isn't really a loss for the Ford GT, because in our opinion, both of these cars are great examples of their racing lineage. The Senna being basically a road representation of a Formula 1 car with its low weight and super high downforce, and the Ford GT showing how crazy something that is technically still a GT car can be with its high top speeds. These cars are both great halo cars for both brands, and we are really glad that companies are making cars like this, even if most of us just get to look at them and talk about them on the internet. Be sure to click subscribe and notify so you can keep up to date with all these crazy cars companies are making these days.